programs will be there. That will also be part of this Benazir Income Support Fund. Transparency, they're trying to enhance. There have been issues, there have been problems, there have been allegations that is being done on a political basis. They have got a team from the World Bank which is conducting a survey on this particular account and come up with a report and the mechanism whereby this could be made more transparent for the next year. The People's Work Program is another area where there is 35 billion rupees are being allocated to create employment opportunities. Workers' welfare, 10.8 billion is being allocated for development schemes. The marriage grant, which is given to the workers in a factory, is being enhanced, and number of other measures, including the microfinance allocation, which is reach is being enhanced from 2 billion to 3 million. These are the measures which are being taken for next year. Focus on agriculture and manufacturing sector to enhance productivity and competitiveness. Very little we have been able to achieve. Agriculture growth has come, as I have said and I repeat, it's dependent on the mother nature. And if the weather is good and we have good crops, we have got good growth. And if we don't have good growth. And that's the problem which has remained all through with our agriculture products. We haven't done anything on the actual productivity and yield per acre. But agriculture has, out of the 2% basically GDP growth, has contributed 50% of that growth has come from agriculture sector. And 1.92 has come from the services sector. These are two sectors which have contributed. That is 2.92% contribution has come in, which has been dragged back to 2 by 0.92% by the manufacturing sector. Now, what is being done? Manufacturing sector, as all of you know, has gone down. The large-scale manufacturing has come down by 7.7%, and that's an important area. And let's see what measures are being taken in that regard. These are the measures for upgrading and working on the agriculture side. For the sake of time, I will not take you through all of them, but I'll just leave a slide for a couple of minutes so that you can look at it and understand the measures which are being taken. There is an increase and enhancement of PSDP allocation for that agriculture. More important thing is basically the plan to come up with the research bodies for wheat and cotton, and also an agreement with Monsanto of US, which is going to introduce the genetically modified type of the cotton. And there are a lot of resources, investment which is being made, which is almost 60 billion for the water sector. There is also Benazir tractor scheme, which is being allocated 4 billion. There's capacity enhancement for dairy products. There's power reduction through smallholders' livestock plans, and a lot of money is allocated for that purpose. There's focus on fisheries. In terms of industries, you must have heard that nothing has been done. The certain things which are there in the budget, I will just take you through. 40 billion is an export investment support fund which is being created, which 10 billion will be funded by the government. 10 billion will come from an export development fund which already exists, and the government agencies. And that is basically the profits of the banks will be mopped to raise 20 billion rupees. And that's how the 40 billion fund is being created, which is an export investment support fund. There's a fund for guaranteeing the SME sector, and that's important. That's 2.5 billion which is being done. There's a venture capital fund being created. There's a new DFI which is being set up. We may have another Industrial Development Bank of Pakistan, and other allocations which are there for various projects. There is construction. A benefit comes through 200 per ton reduction of the duty. The textile, people say there's no benefit or incentive given. Some of that is described. The honorary advisor to the finance minister, the prime minister, said that he has allocated 40 billion rupees basically for the textile sector. We don't see in the budget planning, but I mean, he said that. Similarly, there are funds for the cellular service providers. So there are a lot of areas where some regulations are being developed for Corporate Rehabilitation Act, that is for bankruptcy and insolvency regime, and the resolution trust companies which are being created. I'm not taking you through all of that. PSDP allocation has increased. One thing is very, very important, and that is for the integrated energy plan which is being developed. The major crisis we had was the energy crisis in the country, and there is a 100% increase in terms of allocation of that. From 11.4 billion, which was there, 22.8 billion is being allocated for this. And another process is underway, whereby the major problem of the secular debt, which was causing the liquidity constraint for IPPs and the private sector companies, particular, and including a lot of other companies which were suppliers to these companies, that is being resolved. There is a plan whereby this secular debt is going to be adjusted. We have a lot of other projects in pipeline which are given. Let me take you back. Restore investors' confidence. That's another area. That's an area where I think very little has been done. Then again, there's been a PSDP. We have very high allocation for PSDP this year, but we'll have to see the efficiency of that expenditure and actual benefit of value addition coming out of that, that expenditure has to increase, because there is a problem in terms of the actual value addition coming by expenditure which is being made on these development projects. This is just the composition of the GDP. I won't like to take you through these figures. You know, I've described already. Inflation is an area which I'm sure, is being said. The average inflation for this particular year, we are expecting about 21%, which is being budgeted for next year at 9.5%. So against 21, we are budgeting 9.5%. I hope we are in a position to achieve that. That's what the whole crisis has resulted into. That's how our young boys and girls are just sitting and waiting for things to come to them, to have the basic access to the needs. That's the way all of us are trying to grab what we could get. These have been the objectives for the 2009-10 budget, and I'll not take you through that because I've already discussed most of it which has been there. This SWOT analysis, those of you who have got the commentary issued by the firm must have got it. I won't like to take you through all of that, but that's what I have tried to do, that what are the strengths of the economy, what are the weaknesses of the economy, what are the opportunities in the economy, and what are the threats in the economy. And out of all that, then what are the challenges which are eventually arising to the country. And these are the challenges which I have listed. I'll briefly talk about it a little later. I'm conscious of the time, and I'd like to conclude within time. These are the key areas of economic development. And I'm just trying to recap. Inflation, that we have to target. Balance between consumption and savings, we'll have to work. We can't go to one side of the reform process or the other. We'll have to strike a balance. And I think good thing is that this particular year, 2009-10, there is a balance to an extent that we are expanding the fiscal deficit up to 5% rather than trying to reduce it, but still trying to achieve 3.3% growth. And that is what we have to continue to do. We have to achieve the growth, and we have correspondingly, we'll have to manage our fiscal balance as well. But continuation of a particular deficit doesn't mean that we are not growing or our economic development is not taking place. If we are achieving all other factors which are important, then we are achieving that. Strengthening the direct government intervention, and that is an area which is important. This is happening all over. It will have to happen here. The regulations will have to become more transparent. The concept of making sure that wherever the government has to intervene, it has to intervene for the benefit of the people who really are not in a position to achieve certain things on their own. And that's what we have to try to do. Import substitution, that has to be a target, and one particular measure which you will hear, which is there, that the tax, withholding tax, has been increased from 2% to 4% on the imports. It's been doubled, which may have an impact on the import situation. But it will not have impact on its own unless we come up with a plan for coming up with import substitution industries and giving them necessary incentives and infrastructure facilities to help them grow. Inequality, we'll have to make sure that the growth is inclusive. 2007 growth was non-inclusive. We were growing, but the rich was becoming richer and the poor were becoming poorer. The gap was widening. We'll have to make sure that a gap narrows down. Ensuring efficiency and productive utilization of public sector development. We are starved of investment. Foreign investment is hardly going to be there. What we are looking for, even the local domestic investment is shying away under the circumstances. We'll have to trigger it through the public sector development program. And that is something which is there. We have a 650 million development program which is there, which is planned, and let's hope we are in a position to have these commitments met, because it is dependent on some external resources, particularly the commitments which have been made by the Friends of Pakistan. And if those are materialized, then all those projects may come through and we'll be able to achieve that growth level we are talking about. Accelerated focus on social sector, develop culture of living within our means, reallocation of resources from general administration, defense, etc., raise revenue from financial services and other profitable sectors. Particularly, one important factor we have to realize, the trend in the world is that tax active income less and the passive income more. What we are doing is we are taxing active income more, and the passive income we are either giving exemption totally in the form of the exemption of the capital gain or the real estate gains, and or the reduced rates in terms of the property income and others, which is contrary to what is required for a particular policy which is for the welfare of the people. Then, Millennium Development Goals, those should be the goals, the real goals, rather than compliance of commitments. This is very, very important. We should not just try to show that we are complying with certain commitments. We'll have to follow them as goals. And these goals should be dynamic and progressive. This is important. Values are embedded in the culture, and the role models are the people at the top who govern. And that's the tragedy of our society. If you today ask the people who govern, what are they contributing to the revenue which we are going to generate as tax revenue, we'll have a very sorry state of affair, and the figures will be very little. The contribution has to come at that level, and that's why the values are required to be embedded in our culture, and our people who are ruling us or governing us have to become role models. We have to live within our means, and our leaders have to demonstrate integrity, honesty, simplicity, and transparency. A great ambition, but that's what you need. We have to first get rid of Kashkol as a nation, and then ensure that our people get rid of their begging bowels. That's what we require. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Masood Naqvi, for a wonderful, thought-provoking presentation as usual. Here I would like to thank GeoTV and Express TV and Ash TV for sending their representatives and covering this seminar. It's time for me to introduce and request Mr. Ibrahim Yaqub Sidat, to present this paper on the direct taxation. Mr. Yaqub Siddharth, please.
I don't have presentations, I don't need this. रखने की जगह नहीं होगी. सही है. Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. Members of the current council and the current regional committee and the members to be of the council and to be regional committee. Past presidents, worthy members, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. As in the past, we are here for this traditional annual congregation following the presentation of the federal budget. You have heard my friend Masood's very detailed and comprehensive overview of the budget is like and what are the macroeconomic objectives. I would now come down on the ground with micro issues, with macro provisions dealing with direct taxation. Ladies and gentlemen, there is no denying the fact that in a country like ours, budget making is no ordinary exercise. It has never been. And with the passage of time, with the surmounting problems that we have, it is becoming more and more rigorous. It is also true that we are in exceptional circumstances in all material respects, be it political, be it economic, be it local, be it theological, be it social. And of course, in terms of law and order and security situation, undoubtedly we are in an extraordinary situation. And when you have an extraordinary situation, extraordinary circumstances call for extraordinary measures. But then there has to be some bounds of that. There has to be a certain framework. There has to be certain restraining factors so that we don't go overboard. Before we undertake a more detailed analysis of what is in it for us as far as finance bill is concerned, we should lay down for us certain governing considerations on what is the touchstone on which we should try to test what the provisions are, whether they meet those considerations, those fundamentals, or they are totally divorced or partly divorced from that. In any tax provision which comes in, we need to see whether it furthers the tax reforms agenda which we have laid down in recent years. It is a commitment which we have made to all the bodies to whom we have spread out the begging ball, which Masood very nicely showed in quite a few slides. Whether the proposed amendment, taken as a whole, whether it has a sense of positive direction, and it is here where I'll have to speak a lot about what is the implication of each provision in terms of meeting the reforms agenda and in terms of whether it is in a positive direction with a certain sound conceptual premises or not. It is no use just talking about it or criticizing or supporting it right, left, and center. We need to test it on the basis of these principles. These are the fundamentals. Whether it will help economic development, whether it will contribute towards poverty alleviation, and whether it will facilitate meeting the social and egalitarian objectives. whether we would be able to have the right kind of resource mobilization, which of course we need in truckloads, and in doing that, whether it would be broadening the tax base. It is all very well to have resource mobilization, but are we squeezing the same lot from whom we have been squeezing every drop in the last about 60 plus years? Are we broadening the tax base in the real sense, not just adding to the number of saying, okay, we have got 3 million taxpayers or 3 million plus taxpayers and whatnot? And whether the provisions are articulated in a sagacious and a rational manner without imposing undue burden on those who are already in the tax net and perhaps are overly taxed. Whether the functions and objectives of tax administration, are they being properly addressed to foster an environment of harassment-free tax assessment? Is it going to be taxation without tears and without fears? This we need to see while evaluating each important provision which the Finance Bill is seeking to bring in. Ladies and gentlemen, you would recall that in the early 90s, a major tax reform process was initiated. And as a result of that, certain innovative provisions, which may perhaps be debatable, questionable, controversial, in terms of testing it on the premises of conceptual framework, may not fulfill all the requirements and may not satisfy all those. But they were brought in. And they were brought in with an intent to have the resource mobilization as also to free the taxpayers from the vagaries of our tax system. One of those provisions, way back in 1991 or perhaps 1992, was the introduction of what was then called minimum tax. And the idea was that when a particular empirical study was carried out, it was a very startling revelation, and I have often shared this on forums such as this, that we took a sample of 10,000 corporate entities in Pakistan at that time to see what is their tax to turnover ratio. Because after all, in those days, it was a bottom line taxation, taxation on profits. So in that analysis, it came loud and clear that it is a very, very bleak picture. Out of that 10,000 sample, over 3,000 plus companies did not pay tax at all for the last many years that was carried in the survey. An equal number paid a paltry amount, which calculated on a calculator to 4 or 5 places of decimal will take you nowhere in terms of tax to turnover ratio. And to cut the whole long story short, in the ultimate analysis, only 300 plus companies, I'm not missing a zero, only 300 plus companies, their tax to turnover ratio was somewhere little less than 1, or in certain cases little over 1. It thus dawned on us as members of the Tax Reforms Committee that something needs to be done. After all, this cannot be on. You are in the business of engaging in business. And therefore, there must be some contribution by all. Okay, we begin with from the corporate sector. And so was born the scheme of minimum tax. And I know there was a lot of hue and cry. I got a lot of flag. And I said on the other day, on some other forum, I do arrogate to myself being the author of that particular provision as a member of the Tax Reforms Commission. And I was inspired by some comparable regimes elsewhere. And we did say to us that if we impose a 0.5% tax on turnover, this is not a very tall order. And therefore, the beginning was made that there shall be a turnover tax, as it was then called, a minimum tax, at the rate of 0.5% on the turnover, regardless of whether you have a loss in the current year, you have a no taxable income as a result of carry forward losses, you have an exempt income, you have got an accelerated depreciation, so on and so forth. Your contribution to the national kitty would be at least 0.5% of the turnover. It continued. It continued for good almost 16, 17 years. And to at least my personal great amazement, we were told last year that there was no sizable revenue from that particular provision, and hence we scrap it. Okay, fine, very good, you scrap it. Only to hear this time again, as a part of the explanatory memorandum which the board has issued along with the finance bill, that our inference was wrong. Sorry. There was a good collection out of that. We made a mistake. Now, come to think of it, we are talking about a national budget lying before the Parliament in the form of a finance bill. And what was said last year for removing it, and what is being said now for bringing it again. This is an irony. It is now being told, no, the revenue was substantial. It was a statistical data mistake, and so we have rationale to bring it again. Although the rationale for bringing it originally was, as I said before, to require everyone to make their bit of contribution to the national exchequer. Anyway, just to summarize the whole thing, Section 113 is again on the statute book, having rested for 1 year, being in the cold storage. And this year again it has come in with certain major differences. The overall definition of turnover continues to be the same, except for certain qualifications to which I will allude to shortly. Year before last, perhaps in 2006 or 7, I don't remember exactly, a very important innovation was brought in. And that was a rollover effect. If your minimum tax in the current year, which you have paid, okay, if in the succeeding 5 years you are able to equalize it based on your tax liability, then this provision has been brought back again, but with a change. It is no longer 5 years, it is going to be 3 years. So you can adjust your minimum tax if you don't have the proper corresponding income to support that. You can avail this minimum tax paid against your future tax liability for the next 3 years. Previously, that was 5 years. This was brought in 2006, but this year the period has been reduced from 5 years to 3 years. Another important change in this regime is that if you make a gross loss, now gross loss, as an accountant, all of us I think know what gross loss is, and we are talking about over the line, the trading account, the cost of sales, without taking the effect of allowable depreciation and inadmissible expenses. As you know, there are certain expenses which statutorily are inadmissible. Without taking the effect of that, if you end up in a gross loss, then you are not required to pay minimum tax. This provision was not there all those 16 years. This is a big change. But then in making change, my own humble observation has always been that we don't do it with an open heart. We sometimes try to give it only to take it back with the other hand. In this particular provision, there is an enabling provision giving powers, almost unfettered for that matter, to the tax authorities, to the commissioner, that if the gross loss minus the depreciation factor, minus the inadmissible expenses, if that is the result of, they use a very